Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation podcast network.
The great thing about the headache and migraine community is that they're willing to learn and listen and do better. I just wish there was more representation and there was just more than my voice speaking on this, because it will make a bigger impact.
Welcome to Talking Head Pain, a podcast that confronts head pain head on. I'm Joe Coe, Director of Education and Digital Strategy at GHLF. I've lived with migraines for over 20 years, so I understand what it can do to your life. Today, we have the migraine diva, someone who I consider to be a longtime friend, who has officially anointed me migraine diva number 2. I wear that title with pride. So how are you doing today, Jaime?
I'm doing okay. I'm having a bit of a rough morning, but I'm here like I always am.
We're going to make it better, I think. I hope, after our conversation. So what is a tough morning for you?
Well, this particular morning started with a really severe occipital neuralgia attack around 3 or 4 o'clock this morning, and it's been ongoing ever since. So what that feels like for me is intense pressure at the back of my head, and this time it's on the right side. Feels like somebody's drilling into the back of my head and like stabbing at the same time. It's really intense. There isn't much I can do for it, but it's flaring up because Botox is due and I get that next week. So it's rearing its ugly head. So I'm just going to have to deal with it until next week, I guess.
I get Botox next week too. We're Botox twins. So I want to know, Jaime, what is a migraine diva?
Migraine diva for me is a way for me to hold on to my identity. And for me, that's someone who loves creative outlets, specifically makeup and hair and all of that stuff that I identify with, that just allows me to create different personas or express the way I'm feeling on a particular day. And that's something I've always loved since high school. Fashion, makeup, hair, I just always loved it. And it's not for any vanity reason. It's just a great outlet for me. And so when I started my blog and I was trying to think of what to call it, that kind of popped in my head. I'm like, that sounds like it's glamorizing migraine, but it's really about my own self-identity. And, living with chronic migraine and intractable migraine, you really lose yourself within the disease because you're dealing with it nonstop, 24/7, 365. And so I really needed to start to pull back from identifying with my disease and personifying my symptoms, and really learning to recognize that I'm still the same girl I was back in 1993 with the same passions and love for creative things. So that's where that comes from. And that's what a migraine diva is for me.
I love it. And I want to know, what is a migraine diva tip for someone to look good and feel good?
It's whatever drives you, whatever your passion is, whatever your love for something is, just don't give up on that. It could be anything. It's just taking that time to do what makes you feel good and really pouring into yourself. I think that will make anybody a diva because you're prioritizing your own needs, your self-care, making sure you're whole. That's what is important to anybody, regardless of your race or your gender. It's taking care of what makes you, you, and fulfilling your needs and making sure you're okay by whatever means that is. Go ahead and do it.
So you talked about your passion being makeup and hair and fashion. What are some of the trends that you're loving right now in that world? And what are some that we should maybe steer clear of?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. I don't really follow any trends.
You make the trends.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I know what looks good on me. I think I do pretty well with making colors work with each other. Honestly, what my trend is usually is loungewear and lots of pajamas because I spend so much time in the house. But that doesn't mean I can't sit in my vanity and beat this face to the gods. Okay. I'm not a big follower of trends like I was back in high school. I mean, I used to love Isaac Mizrahi and like watch all the supermodels like Naomi and Linda Evangelista and all of those icons. But I really don't have time for that. I don't have the budget for that. I just wear what makes me feel good, what makes me feel confident. And I really try, I think what I'm doing more now is trying to wear more bright colors, like the orange I'm wearing today. Like I usually wear darker colors, especially since I'm a bit overweight. Black and dark colors are my friends, but I'm trying to brighten up my wardrobe. So that's what I'm trying to do, just trying to incorporate more colors and be more vibrant. And then that gives me an opportunity to play more with the different palettes I have and wear brighter colors on my face that I normally don't. So that's my trend.
I love that. And for our listeners who may not know what beating your face is, it's not actually beating your face. It means putting on really good makeup. I recently told my sister-in-law, I sent her to a makeup artist for a wedding that she was attending. And I said, tell them that you want your face beat. And she goes to my friend, I want you to hurt my face. My friend was like, oh, sweetie, you meant beat your face. We don't want our faces to hurt when we have migraine, but we like a beat sometimes, get a little color, get some freshness there. So yeah, and your makeup's looking amazing today, by the way.
Thank you. And let me tell you, it's a struggle for me to apply a face of makeup because I have trigeminal neuralgia also. So touching my face with any of my makeup brushes, just applying makeup. Right now, I have so much pain around this side of my face, and putting on eye makeup causes this eye to just run. Trying to put on liquid eyeliner and mascara is like troublesome because I have like black streaks going down my face. So it takes a while. It is a painful process for me, but I endure it because usually the end product is worth it. So,
And I think it's important that we acknowledge that for some, putting on eyeliner is going to be a big task. For others, it's something that people take for granted. And we need to be gentle with ourselves around what we do to make ourselves feel better. So find that inner diva in you, like what you were saying about earlier, Jamie, defining that for ourselves is so important when we live a chronic disease. And it's one of the reasons why I'm drawn to you and your energy, because you impart that spirit and that wisdom in all the work that you do.
yeah, that's important for me because it keeps me in line with what I discuss and what I share, keeps myself accountable for taking care of myself. You have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So it's a great way for me to practice what I preach. And sometimes we're not always good at taking care of ourselves and putting ourselves first and doing what we need to do to make sure that we're in a good, safe, protected space. And specifically living with chronic diseases, so much of our time is occupied with managing that and doctor's appointments. And that's outside of what your life looks like, whether you're in a partnership, you have children, you're in a career, or you're in school. It doesn't stop life from happening just because you have a chronic illness or disease. So it takes a lot of energy to manage and balance all of that. I try to make sure to let people know that it's not necessarily always about the huge accomplishments that you have throughout the day. If you're able to do something that you weren't able to do the day before, make sure that you congratulate yourself on that because it's the little wins that really make a difference and really not the big victories all the time. Because personally, for me, I don't have a lot of those. So the fact that I was still able to get out of the bed today and manage to put this face of makeup on and sit here and look and sound intelligent, that's a big win for me because yesterday I wasn't this way at all. So it's important for me to make sure that I give myself grace and just take it one step at a time and one day at a time. I really try not to focus on what happened yesterday or what needs to happen tomorrow. I need to reserve my energy for the 24 hours that I'm currently in. Having that mindset is not only helpful for how I pace myself, but it's also a way for me to manage my mental health and not spiral down into that anxiety of, oh my gosh, this is going to happen and I'm not prepared for it, which can then trigger the depression. And I have to be very mindful of where I let my mind go. So just staying focused on the day that I'm in really helps me get through each day of the week.
So true. It's really important to celebrate the small victories, like you said. And we don't do that as a culture enough. Cheers when we drink a glass of water. Like that's an accomplishment. We're drinking more water, which is what everyone says to do. And it's not easy to do. So cheers when you have a cup of water or a glass of water. Jamie, something about you that's so unique in this community is how vulnerable and real you are about not only your struggles with migraine, but also mental health, depression. And you started to talk about that. How has being an advocate and being a visible force in this community as a migraine patient, as a Black woman, both positively and negatively impacted your mental health?
Positively, I think what it has done for me, and I think for a lot of the community that doesn't feel like they're represented, say in like support groups or advocacy groups, is it validates their experience and their journey. It was important for me, specifically as a woman of color, to highlight what it's like for me, for my family, what legacies I come from and what I've had to learn growing up and how that impacts the way I interact with the healthcare system. It's very different for marginalized groups. And that just was not being talked about. And I felt like I needed to make sure I uplifted those voices because if I'm going to be in this space and advocate, I have to make sure I'm true and honest about those experiences that just are not discussed. I also wanted to make sure that I used this opportunity to talk about communities that were just completely ignored. It was my responsibility to do that. And especially since growing up, I received my health care at a federally qualified health center. And I saw low income marginalized communities get great care. And that specific center made sure that everyone that worked there, from housekeeping up to the board, represented the community that they were working in. It was extremely diverse. And I was able to see physicians and dentists and nurses of all races. And that really informed the way I saw healthcare growing up from the age of 5 to 18. That's a very impressionable part of your life. And I knew what those communities needed out of those centers and what they got from them and how important it was to have that level of care. And I saw that was lacking in the migraine and headache community. And I wanted to make sure that these groups I was affiliated with or working with knew that it's more than just those that you seem to target, which are those with commercial health insurance and have access to transportation and healthy grocery stores and are able to manage triggers because they have access to healthy food. There is such a larger community out there that is so neglected. We have to make sure that we're reaching them as well. So being able to bring that to the table has been extremely positive for me. But on the flip side, it has been extremely burdensome and exhausting because I tend to be the only chocolate chip in the cookie a lot of the times. And not having other BIPOC in the room that can speak to what I'm speaking to and support that and have the safety of that understanding is frustrating.
It is important to hear that Jamie's perspective isn't an indictment against any individual or group, but her sharing her experience and the countless others who push against institutional racism. When we personalize these perspectives, it often decreases our opportunity to hear it. Please listen with an open heart and mind.
Unfortunately, a lot of the time, who I'm dealing with are mostly white and female, and they're doing great work, but I don't always feel like it's a safe space for me to talk about how this has impacted me as a Black patient advocate and not seeing the diversity in leadership. When you look at websites, you don't necessarily always see a history of work in marginalized communities. So when we're trying to get BIPOC to buy in and they go and look at these events or organizations, they're not seeing themselves. So that's the frustrating part for me. And it's going to take a lot of work, but I'm not the only Black person with migraine out there with a voice. and retelling my story as much as I've had over the last 2 years, specifically the trauma of dealing with implicit bias and overt racism, re-traumatizes me. So I need to protect myself. And I think that's something my white colleagues don't ever think about when they ask me to talk about it. I'm like, well, I have to relive it again. And that's not an experience you've had to deal with. But the great thing about being in the headache and migraine community is that they're willing to learn and listen and do better. So there is safety in that. I just wish there was more representation and there was just more than my voice speaking on this, because it will make a bigger impact.
Definitely. And that leads to my follow-up question. You made me think of a statement that I heard around politicians. White politicians shouldn't be going to Black churches denouncing racism. They should be speaking in their white churches denouncing racism. And I think that that statement is really powerful and applicable to the migraine world. White organizations and people like me need to do the work with our colleagues to create the environment that makes it less of a burden for you to share your story. And we might not need your story all the time. We might need to work on our implicit bias without that story, because it's not your responsibility to educate all the time and to educate us. What would your needs be from allies in this work for around health disparities? I could think of it as a gay man, but as a Black woman, what would organizations need to do to be better allies to you and others?
I think it honestly starts with leadership. There just isn't that voice. There isn't that culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion in executive leadership. And so without those experiences and those voices, there's going to be a disconnect. And I would just love to be able to see that progression. And it's going to take time if you've never done this before, but I think it's a self-education. I think, like you said, too many times our white allies go to their BIPOC colleagues or friends to help them figure things out. And like I always say, I didn't create this problem. I don't know how to fix it, and I'm not here to help you fix it. I'm just here to make you aware that it exists. But really taking those initiatives to research different organizations that are BIPOC-led or focused, instead of asking me, well, do you know of any organizations? I'm like, all it takes is a Google search, and you need to start reaching out. That's, I think, a difficult thing to get people to do. I mean, they really have to be motivated to do that. All I can do is say, this is what's helpful for us. This is what we seek in our allies. And most importantly, not to immediately get defensive when we talk about what we see and what can be better, and not use it as an opportunity to say, well, this is what we're doing. Okay, that's wonderful. But I'm telling you, as a Black woman from a Black family, from Black history, there's always more that can be done. And especially, we need our white allies and our colleagues and organizations to really do better at educating the engaged patient population in this specific community, because it's majority white and female. So when we discuss issues around race, there is a lot of white women centering their experiences on those articles or those posts or those podcasts, which needs to be quelled. It's not about, I'm a woman, so I experienced this too. You don't have the intersectionality daily of being a woman or a man and also being from a marginalized group or a historically disenfranchised group. So it's not about your experience, and nobody is making it less important, but we need to be able to feel safe to talk about what we go through and how our experience is so much different just because we walk in with this color on our skin and people are already perceiving us a certain way, and they already made up in their mind how they're going to treat us before we even open our mouths. I would really love to see a more inclusive patient population and support groups that really make people who feel othered welcome.
I've done a lot of thought about these topics and what I could do individually, what GHLF can do as an organization. I think what happens oftentimes with really well-intentioned people is that you use the word centering our stories. We personalize it. So we hear something and either something bad happened to us, so it's the same, and we reduce the experience, or we're like, we never could have implicit bias. That's not how I was raised. That's not what I believe. And a shift for me that has really helped me understand this in areas that I have a lot of privilege is A, I'm not going to lose anything by listening to the experience. I don't lose my experience. I don't lose my position in the world. I don't lose anything. I potentially can gain a really nuanced and rich understanding of a topic that I might not understand. So depersonalizing it and making it not about us, when we are providing space and we then say, well, our organization does this, or I have done this, or I have this experience, it inadvertently negates what that person just took all that energy to share. So it's natural for us to do that, especially people that are doing good work. And these organizations that you're working with are doing good work. You wouldn't work with them. I know you. You wouldn't work with them. And we're not doing enough because we're not really putting in the mental work that it takes to say, all right, I can be uncomfortable here. I'm not going to die as a white man hearing this perspective. And if I need to wait a week to share my perspective, I can wait the week to share it. It doesn't need to happen right then when that person is vulnerable and sharing their experience of implicit and explicit and overt bias, because it negates it. So I think that's a lot of the soul searching that we need to do. And it's a process for those folks. And then there's people that we're never going to reach. And we have to cut ties. When GHLF put out a statement around Black Lives Matter a couple of years ago, we got a slew of emails. People were like, "Duh, duh, duh, duh," and I was like, but unsubscribe. This isn't not negotiable topic. Black Lives Matter, period. There isn't a debate here. It's not and, it's not but or, it's period. And if that's not vibing with you, this isn't the right space for you at this time. There are other spaces that are right for you. And organizations need to decide for themselves. And there isn't a right or wrong answer. It's what we need to decide what our ethic is and what we choose to do. So it's so important to not waste your energy as white organizations, as white people, because you're giving us a gift. And we need to take that gift and act on it and not go back to the people that gave us the gift and say, oh, you gave us a gift. Can you give us another gift? So pay Black people for their work. That's something that we do at GHLF. It's just the right thing to do. Hire Black people. You talked about promoting and having leadership. That's really important. We're seeing large companies do that, which is amazing, that's starting to shift. And that's really important. So we could talk about this for days, I'm sure. Was there anything that I missed that you wanted me to ask, or anything that you wanted to add, Jaime?
I want to really encourage organizations to seek out the Black disabled advocates that are active, like on Twitter. There's such a great group of people, and they're filled with so much diversity. I think it doesn't matter what your disease state is or your level of disability, just having as many voices in the conversation is what's going to enrich that community. It's more than just our one specific area of advocacy. We really need to look into what so many other people's experiences are and what their challenges are and how they may overcome that and what they're doing to support themselves, and using that as educational tools to make better programs, more diverse programs. And I don't think we have enough voices really speaking to their experiences specifically in those groups. And when it comes to policy work, really reaching out to those BIPOC specific health organizations and seeing what their focus is on state and federal policy and whether they align with your work and what you're trying to achieve and your goals, and really starting to create these relationships and really investing in working with organizations that historically have always worked with those groups of people and communities, and really trying to follow what has worked for them and letting them speak honestly and openly about wherever gaps may be, where you need to correct things and how you can do things better, and take that constructive criticism and turn it into something beautiful for people that may feel left out in the work that you're doing. And I know that these groups are not intentionally doing these things. I think it's just, if you don't know about it, you're not going to do anything about it. So it's just about making yourself more mentally available to think outside of your own comfortable space and think of, well, this is what I know, but let me try to think of other people and other situations and see what I can do to bring that in. It's very easy to forget that there are millions of people out there that aren't able to hop in a car and drive somewhere, who don't have grocery stores, that have to go to the corner store, the gas station. Their neighborhoods are filled with fast food restaurants. If you don't live in that type of environment and it's not a safe environment, how would you know how to even get into that community and do work there and get them to trust you and the work that you do and that you really care about them? It's about starting with those organizations that have historically already been there and have been doing that for years, and just learning the ropes and just being humble along the way.
And it's a deliberate process, because we would go with the tide and not make change, and that would be easy. It's walking against the tide and being deliberate in these actions and thought processes that you're talking about, Jaime. And it's something that we need to do better at as migrant organizations, as a country, as a world. Another world is possible, and we can make that. It'll take a lot of work from people like me and others to do it. We need to listen with open hearts and minds, and then take that and act. And I think that will build a lot of small victories into large victories, like we talked about. This is why I love talking to you, Jaime. We can go from talking about makeup to institutional oppression. And it all is connected, and it all makes sense, because our lives are complicated, and we are these amazingly wonderful, diverse, unique people that live in a really interesting time. And we can make some great change together if we listen to folks like you.
Yeah, we really can. And, it's on my heart to say that I just want to make sure that all of the organizations I work with understand that this is nothing personal. I'm not singling anybody out. It's just what's obvious. And we just always need to do better and just increase our diversity. And I'll always be the touch point for that. But I just want to make sure that they understand that I love them. And I wouldn't work in this space if they weren't great organizations and great people. I just have to speak to what I see and what can be done better, and just know that I'm here to help us get to a better place. And I think this leads into that, what I was talking about earlier about not feeling protected, because you don't always feel safe to be this honest. And I always am worried about backlash. But I think the topic and the discussion is way more important than that. But I do want to reassure those folks that I work with that I love you guys. The work that we have been doing over the last 2 years has been great and amazing, and it's really going to create a lot of change. But we still have a long road ahead of us. And these are the things we still need to work on. So that's just what I was speaking to. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're not doing the work, because they are.
Definitely. And everything that you're saying, we need to hear at GHLF too. I would include any organization needs to hear it. So it's about that not taking it personal. It's important to hear.
Yeah.
And there are truths that we could take. Any organization listening to this today can learn something from what you said that's doing amazing work. We can do better. So I just really value your time, your energy, your passion, your vibrancy with your color choice today. I mean, I did the total opposite. I'm like, let's mute it down, Joe, because I was so excited to talk to you. And I really value and honor and respect your experience and your energy and your work.
I really appreciate that. And same to you. I mean, you're such a passionate person, and your voice and your commitment to things that matter really motivate me and really inspire me. And I feel very grateful to be your friend and to have you in my corner, as I hope you know I'm in yours. So I think it was kismet that we met. And I knew immediately you were diva number 2. So please wear that crown with pride, with your head held high, because you deserve it.
I do. And if anyone has any backlash for Jaime, my email is jco@ghlf.org. You can give it to me. I could take a little backlash.
Thank you, friend.
Thanks for listening to Talking Head Pain, a podcast that confronts head pain head on. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a rating and write a review on Apple Podcasts. It'll help more people like you find us. I'm Joe Coe, and we'll see you next time. This season of Talking Head Pain is made possible with support from Amgen, sponsor of the Global Healthy Living Foundation.
Be inspired, supported, and empowered. This is the Global Healthy Living Foundation Podcast Network.